kid, the world is nice and bright, and the possibilities seem endless. We think we can do anything, nothing can hold us back, and we're fearless due to our misunderstanding of the world and how it works. But there comes this time, and we all know it, where the world begins to lose a bit of that shine that it used to have. We all have a moment where we learn that the world is dark, not that happy place that we looked at so fondly. That innocence is cast away as we learn what dark secrets it holds. And in that moment, something drives in us to change that dark world to make it what we want it to be. And that brings me to the topic of today's video and why the Promised Neverland is a successful failure. But before we get into this video, if you're new, don't hesitate to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and hit that bell for notifications when you want to hear things that I have to say. Now let's get into it. Alright, so a lot of you clicked on this video wondering how can the Promised Neverland ever be a failure? It's done great on Crunchyroll, the anime got a second season, and everyone just loves it. But all of this would be true, except for the one fact that you're just wrong. There's a lot wrong with the Promised Neverland, and I'll be extensively talking about season 1 of the anime and the rest of the manga, which will include spoilers. Many spoilers. So the Promised Neverland is a story created by Kaiyu Shirai and Posuka Demizu, I hope I didn't butcher that, about these orphans who are all together and are waiting to be adopted. However, when they hit 13 or something, they're supposed to get adopted. The children live in a foster home and are cared by this woman that they call Mama. Everything is normal until we see the rigorous daily tests that they're put through. There are 3 kids who are super geniuses and are a year away from actually being adopted. Their world is twisted when one day a little girl is adopted and she forgets the stuffed animal, so the main character Emma and Norman, the best character for right now, go to give it back. They make it to this huge gate. This huge gate is one thing that they were told as children to never get close to for any reason whatsoever. But being the children that they are, they go in, and to their dismay, what they find is that their friend is in a vat. That's right, they also find these demons that they've never seen, and as well as their mother, the lady who was taking care of them. And that's the perfect incident to kick off all of the mind games that ensue and cause the kids to want to get the hell out of that kid farm. Okay, now this is the first arc of the manga, and it takes place over the span of about 4 1/4 volumes and 37 chapters. However, the series ends at chapter 181, and this is relatively short for a Shonen Jump manga series, but also a nice amount of time for a series run. 4 years in fact. At this point, the series is at its strongest here. It has the children pitted against the demons and the kids with no powers except for their exceptional knowledge and wit. They have a deadline to get off this plantation, which creates amazing tension and stakes. There's a lot on the line, and you know what? This is great. I love all the main characters and the different strengths that they bring and how analytical they are to the situations that may seem a bit fantastical, but also a bit grounded. I mean, they're trying to not get eaten by demons. But that said, this arc is strong because of the mind games and the confinement of the setting. The whole show had me filled with these Death Note vibes as I read it. I had a lot of expectations as the anime was announced, so many possibilities, and I was, well, disappointed. Alright, so the anime had a nice source material that was super strong. How could have it gone wrong? Bars. That's right. I thought it was an easy home run for them. Now we're gonna go dig into what I think went wrong with the whole anime. Now before I go ripping this anime a new one, there were actually a few things that I did enjoy about it, although they pale in comparison to what I thought was absolute garbage about it. And this is what I think the anime did correct. Okay, all jokes aside, I watched the first episode and I was actually really hyped for it. The anime had opened with my favorite band of all time, Overworld, and they had that dope song opening, and I had it on repeat for weeks, and you know how it all starts with the fire, all that cool stuff. The whole tone of the episode was really on it. Everything that happened in the first episode played out so amazing, I couldn't believe it. I was like, here we go. This might actually be on my coveted top 5 anime list. The angles, the direction of the shots, and even how the sound design for the episode was on point. I kid you not. This could have been my favorite start to an anime season ever. As the episode went on, all the voice acting was great, it fit each character, and nothing seemed off. I also enjoyed the background music, giving this very fairy tale-esque feeling. It was lighthearted to contrast the dark undertones of what the characters were dealing with. Of course, the best character, who is Norman, my man Norman, literally had everything and was the perfect character and was the voice of reason, who thought through everything before doing anything in the episode. Really a true genius, and would have gotten so far if not for his love for Emma. Oh gosh, Emma, a character we're going to talk about a little bit later, but that's all I could surmise that the anime adaptation got right. And this only sticks around for the first episode, and there are 11 more episodes after this. Now it's time to tear down the walls of the show, because when I say after the rose-colored eyeglasses I had on for episode 1 were removed, the whole tower just came crashing down. So this show, over its 12 episodes run, ran into a lot of problems, and I think the main issue is pacing. So earlier I stated the exact duration of the manga's first arc to make a point that it took them about a year or so to nicely weave out the story of the first season. The anime did what I felt was a super condensed version, whether it would be budget or they thought that they could do it in their own way. I believe they messed up a lot of key points on what could have hooked more people into the series as a whole, and these events follow what happens in the manga, but it was sped through at a fast rate. So the manga did well because of the character conversation with the buildup of tension and action. Think of something like Death Note. I really go back to that manga. Even though it went through breakneck speeds of pacing, it kept the tension tight. That's coming from someone who read the manga before watching the anime. The cuts to the characters' dialogue brings me to the smaller issues that affect the pacing of how events happen. There are certain moments when, for instance, Norman finds out that Ray is a mole, or even when Emma gets her leg broken, or even when the kids are going to talk to their mammy to negotiate. Oh, I got words for this one later. Even when she, the mammy, dies. None of these moments feel tense or emotionally heightened. The shot composition and even the background music add nothing to the moment. It feels like those tense moments all fall flat, and also add a lot of moments of self-reflection on the characters as they interact. That never happens. It's really non-existent. The music doesn't change to reflect in that tension. Now let me take a step back. This could be what I want, but I think it could have made those moments more memorable to people who are watching. I think that it's important to have that contrast in the music to elevate the awesome voice acting and add something to the scene. I talked about it earlier where I said that I really enjoyed that fairy tale-esque feel, and I think it's good in moments, but it doesn't add overall to the moments that we want to be really dialed into. We remember key moments from Death Note and are alerted to things that are going on in the scene. Look at when he ate a freaking potato chip. The background music elevates that scene to another level. Or even look at simpler moments when a realization is made. There's something in the music to heighten that scene to take it to another level. I'm no music composer, but the lack of music relatively made things boring and made the anime drag. With the accompanying music, the shots were boring and nothing stood out or could have been like, ooh, that's a dope shot, like some of these like fisheye lens things that we get, or nice perspective shots. There were none of those in here. I think that the directors leaned a bit too much into the fairy tale aspect. However, as critiques go, this is one of the lesser problems because a lot of the shots were taken directly from the manga. So it's less of a fault on the manga's overall weakness that it might have had. However, the anime couldn't have done too much to improve on it. But then again, what's an anime adaptation if not to elevate the source material? However, the visual composition of the show does this thing playing with these absolute warm colors and absolute cold colors, and I hate it. I don't get overall what it's supposed to convey, but all it does is make the warm and cool colors a mess without any addition to the narrative. It's just odd and a bland choice I don't quite get, as it's so glaring and visually, lack for a better word, whack. If the color changed depending on the mood or something happening in the scene, I'd get it. Like, oh, here we're in danger, boom, but the choice is odd because there are only 3 tones that are used throughout the whole anime. Neutral in the day, warm in the house with light, and dark blues in the shade or in any darkness. It's like they got the anime and slapped an Insta filter on it and they used it to force a mood. But the tone of the show shifts at so many points, thus making that use of the filter, if at all intentional, seem very non-intentional because it's everywhere and in every scene, which could be this fairy tale aesthetic, which is ugly and a whole mess. Now that we've gone through some of the structural issues with this show, through the sped up pace of the anime, it's gotten itself into some overall narrative issues. So before I talked about the tense moments creating intrigue, I want to point out 2 moments that this anime could have really used to pull more people in. First is the introduction of Minerva. This point could have been used to be so much more interesting than it was, and it falls flat when they find out about him in the anime. But even when he is introduced, the problems that I talked about before about the shot composition and the music come up. There's no imagination or talking about him, and it's really short and not built up at all or throughout those 12 episodes. He's talked about once and kind of just forgotten. Not even like an allude to who this man might be or even look like. There's no like metaphor that animes are really nice about doing. He's just a name. And the discovery of Minerva is something that is practically the Kickstarter to know that there are some actual people on the outside and that they actually want to see those people and that there could be allies. And this is a subplot that the 3 converse over a lot, thinking about going back and forth and the other ideas that could possibly happen, thus constantly having a B plot in the viewer's mind, wanting to find out more or trying to look out for clues as they're trying to escape. Okay, so there was that, but this one is the most egregious of the 2. There is this character whose name I can't say because I don't know how to say it, but the anime never mentions that being at all. Ever since I read the manga, I have been waiting to hear it from Sister Crone. There is a scene where she's supposed to say, "Do you know about bleep blop?" Yeah, that's what I'm calling them. I don't know how it's said or whatever because it was never talked about. So how can we even be pulled in more narratively? Maybe this is something that they're thinking about that they can put into next season or another season, but this is the thing about the pacing, that they didn't even include it when they could have. And it would have been such a nice tie-in because it's the only reason they could have thought not to is because maybe they thought they wouldn't have a season 2, so they didn't want to add too much narrative weight to what they were going to add, even though they really didn't need a season 2 because this was so bad. So we have these 2 subplots that really aren't brought up into your review and may be saved for later. But now you must be like, what is the other part? That other part I would like to tell you is Sister Crone. This was the mammy from earlier. This character is very controversial because, you know, she looks like a mammy and she hits on all the negative stereotypes of black people in anime and history, and even in the manga she isn't any better in her portrayal, and the anime did nothing to fix her. But they add this stupid baby doll she carries for whatever stupid reason that I can't think of, which really does nothing for her character. The doll is ugly and is supposed to make me empathize with her. I never saw any point to that filler. They add the doll, but they don't even talk about Bleep Bloop. Let that sink in for a moment. But her voice actor is not very pleasing to the ear as well. Honestly, I wish this character wasn't in the series at all. She's just a tool, like people of color tend to be. A tool to help these kids contextualize the world. Now, this is a knock to the authors, because yes, we need characters of colors, but this was not it, y'all. In the anime, they take away that line about Bleep Bloop and threw in this doll and some silent backstory about her and what she went through right before she died. The anime really wants you to care more about her, and they add these things, but the filler doesn't add anything to the plot in a meaningful way, or it doesn't make me feel any more for Sister Crone. Crone wasn't designed to be cared about. I mean, you can care. Everyone's situation in this story to some degree is pretty messed up. But don't take away the more interesting aspects of the story to make me care about characters that will die and I don't care about in the first place. Funny, this is something that'll come back later at the end of the manga. Okay, so the anime has had its fair share of issues, and you might say, oh, I loved it. It was a great anime, Vandal. I would say to you, yes, you can think that. But in the beginning of all this, I talked about what it's like to be a kid, and that's what it's like for some people watching this anime. Those who enjoyed it are just like the children on the farm. They're enjoying their life and unaware of what other things they might have been missing out on. I would highly recommend that many of you read the first 37 chapters, specifically because this is where the story is at its strongest. This brings me to the super spoilery half of this video, which is talking about season 2 and beyond. So I'll give you a chance to click off of this video in 3, 2, 1. Alright, so now that I've taken a nice dig at the anime, what about the events after they escape? Let's start here. Does anybody remember this movie? This was Maze Runner, a film based off of a book series made in 2014, and it's one of my favorite movies. They made 3 movies in this franchise. This movie had a similar idea of kids in a walled-off garden trying to escape creatures designed to kill them and adults who monitored them. There were a few plot differences, but for the most part, Promised Neverland and Maze Runner ran, see what I did there, in the same vein of a problem. And that problem is, what happens after you escape the walled garden? Because at this point, your world is super small and confined to this world inside of your walls. And this causes your reader or your viewer to really wonder about what's happening outside of those walls. This is at its core the main problem of this story type. The world becomes so huge outside of the walls that bringing in the reins of your story can be really difficult. And you're going to lose your reader at some point due to expectations they might have had about the world outside of the walls. All that wonder you've built up in the person's mind is replaced with what the author has planned, and your expectations that were limitless are now confined, and your ideas about the world might not have met up to those expectations. That's the first problem that arises. The second is the team working on the Promised Neverland, and this is a theory that I have. I don't think they planned for their story to have moved beyond the walls. This was because at the time they were coming out with this story, the new Shonen Jump series that didn't hit a certain mark were getting canceled really quick. So you had to get your story really ready to be canceled at any time. And that really shows in the arcs after they escape. To sum up what happens after they escape, they meander around this alien-like planet, they run into some demons who don't eat people in some forest, they use what they've learned from Minerva to find a base that could help them do something in an important point that is not really set up in the anime about Minerva and his teachings, but it'll come out of nowhere in some backstory in season 2, probably, I'm not sure. They'll probably bring it up in season 2, but they could have just left it in season 1, and that's why I had such a problem about how they handle Minerva in the anime, because in addition to helping the kids not wanting to get eaten, he was really another motivating reason for the kids wanting to escape. That motivation is also cut from the overall story in the anime. And another note to add to this is just generally the point where it's really that low point after they get out of the walls. It's really boring and we're not sure what's coming next because there's a lot of thought process happening here. And one of the things while you were reading it in real time when it was coming out week to week is that it would just take a lot longer to figure out where we were going because the authors themselves, I honestly don't think they knew where they were going with the story, and they needed to take a few weeks off right after it ended to try and figure out the process because the show had blown up at this point. And by show I mean manga. But anyways, back to what happened. So eventually, once they're out of this boring forest, they're gonna get to this base and they're gonna meet this adult, which is dope because it's the first human contact that they've had since they finally got out of the walls. And after a little bit of fighting, they eventually come to have a temporary home. And this was a base that was created by Minerva, and apparently there are a lot of them spread out through all of this world, and they happen to come across one using the books and some other method that they were able to find. During their stay there, they find more about Minerva, and this place that they need to go to that's called Goldie Pond pops up, and this is where they think that they're able to go and actually talk to Minerva. It's some little clue that he's left off, and they don't know how long ago it was, but it's another clue and another place for the kids to go. But the problem with this is that it's in a place that's in a demon hunting ground. And at this point, the manga is back, y'all. It really gets good at this point. And this will probably be around season 3 or 2 of the anime, but I will say that Goldie Pond as an arc was actually interesting and set up things with a lot of payoff for character development with Emma and Ray and the kids overall. This story was really able to rebound at that point, and also the manga was gaining a lot of popularity here. So they get to this place with the man that they met in the base with Emma and Ray, and a whole lot of stuff happens. They find more kids, they learn about these special kinds of kids that are also in this place, and they also learn about the demons in this place. And this part of the arc is where Emma really gets to develop, and she fights this other really strong demon. His name is Luvis, and he's this cool demon dressed in black, and he's just out for the kill and really pushes Emma and her friends to their limits, which is really good for the overall story and pushing Emma's conviction and what will happen to her later in the story, which I kind of don't like, but overall this arc really pushes a lot of the narrative elements forward and the character driven elements forward. Look at that. So after beating this demon and all the demons in the place, they get to talk to past Minerva. I'm not too sure about this point here. I think we also learn about Norman's fate, which is a huge blunder on the author's part. I'll get into that in a bit, but we learn more about the Rattree clan and their involvement, that there are other farms out there from Goldie Pond. And now that I think about it, it's very narratively important. I hope they don't mess this arc up in the anime, because after Goldie Pond, nothing matters. Okay, let me stop being dramatic, but that thing that I talked about earlier, that thing about the world opening up and how your expectations don't ever get met, that's something that's gonna happen again. And post this, things get a little bit messy and we get into a time skip. So what happens is that the world starts to expand a bit more, with us learning a little bit more about the demons, because Emma and friends want to try and look for Bleep Bloop to go make a promise. However, they get attacked by these other people of the Rattree clan, I think, and they find where their hideout is, and their base gets destroyed, and the 2 adults that were with them also die. So they kind of get reset back to the beginning of what happens right outside the walls. It's kind of like a rehash of part 2. And during their time surviving in the wilderness, they come across these other 2 kids who are about to get attacked by these demons, and they save them, and then they realize that they're actually gonna go back to their boss, who is Norman, and we find out that Norman isn't dead. Let's celebrate. So Norman has become the new Minerva, and they're preparing to destroy the demons. However, once they learn of that plan, Emma doesn't like it so much, because at this point, she remembers those 2 demons we talked about earlier. Remember those ones that conveniently don't need to eat people that they met in the alien forest? Well, she realized that, not all demons eat people, so she doesn't want to destroy all the demons. So they make a deal to find Bleep Blop to make that promise. However, Norman is a bit different, and I wonder why. So Norman wasn't killed. Duh, my man was too suave for that. So his story is Rattree sent him to a new farm. It's called Lambda, to be studied. That really isn't made clear, but it's just that Norman is super smart and he's gonna be studied by these scientists. That they are trying to breed humans because the farms are beginning to fail and they're running out of livestock. I know, creepy. All of this is interesting, but it's only given a chapter or so of a flashback. I kid you not, the whole arc or some sort of flashback sequence was needed for this one, y'all. So much happens here that we just hear about it in small lines of text, and it's just like, you could actually just show us this. When we actually come to Norman, this guy who's basically Neo Minerva, but that should be a huge thing because these kids have been believing he's been dead for so long, and look at the glow up. However, something I didn't talk about earlier is the actual Minerva being dead, and his body was never found, and that's something we're gonna get back to at the end. My point to all that is, Norman is such a different character. Give us more to show us what happened to him in Lambda, because there were way more chapters towards the end of this manga that were spent on characters who were just introduced to make us understand and care about them, which I don't. But that time could have been used to be giving Norman a more fleshed out look on his motivations and to see what they are and how they were crafted and who helped them craft them, because apparently he meets some scientists who worked for Minerva and they had Minerva agents, but excuse me, we didn't need to know about that or even see it, just hear it in a few lines of text. That would have been cool to see how they interacted and such, but we never get any of that. Maybe that could be added to the anime later, but I doubt they're gonna do it. There's so much potential to expand the world in a useful way at this point and give the viewer a better understanding of 3 points through Norman. We would learn more about his development, the ties about Minerva, and more about the goals of the Rattree clan, which could be fleshed out a little bit better. Finally, we could have had full closure on Minerva, because honestly, he feels like a ghost, and maybe that's what the author was going for, but I think the other issue is the payoff for him being a ghost and just finding about his death wasn't really satisfactory. It kinda just came and went after 100 chapters or so, and it didn't really amount to much. Again, here comes the big expectations of the character that I had let down by the actuality of the reality of the events. It's a consistent theme that runs throughout this whole story type. Now there's this part about the war, because Norman, Neo Minerva, and his homies are these cold-blooded killers who came from Lambda, which is pretty cool. It gives them a bit more power physically, the group overall, as they're gonna need it for the upcoming war. This is coming because they, Neo Minerva and his friends, are destroying the farms like some Robin Hood vigilantes and saving kids, and thus they have found out what the demons really are. And I'll give the story some credit at this point. These few points here are the really most interesting part about this arc. However, they get way too drawn out at this point and it gets a little bit boring. The origin of the demons was really cool. I honestly had my own theories about it, but I had no idea that they actually would be these amoeba that eventually grew into humans. It was actually a really cool twist on the idea. But there's also Norman's angle, which is really cool about how he wants to destroy them and why he wants to destroy them. But I think, again, like we talked about earlier, Norman's time in Lambda would have done so much more to make his motivation more profound and spelled out for everyone. So Norman and Emma are at a head because of their conflicting ideals. So Norman makes a deal with Emma, like we talked about earlier. If she can make a new promise before he starts his plan, they won't need to go to war. And I really like this part of his characterization because he's so calculating and that never left him from the beginning of the series. What also is a nice addition is that the isolation from his friends has made him a little bit detached and jaded, and that's probably from the things that happened in Lambda that we'll never get to know about. So then at this point, they both make their paths and the kids get left behind to find out Norman's friends might be actually as bad as they say they are, but this is something that gets really glossed over really quick. I don't know why. And then we also learn that Norman is gonna die because he's actually too smart. It's true. Some disease linked to Lambda affected everyone, including him, so basically they're all about to die. So at this point, the war is basically about to start, and this is where 20 chapters of Who Really Cares starts to begin. So remember those two that we talked about in the beginning of the forest of the arc after they get off the walls? They become the most important people in this arc. So Musica is this sacred blooded demon that allows herself to not need humans for food, and apparently she can also give this power to other people. However, the Demon Kingdom doesn't want that for some political nonsense that no one really cares about. So this whole arc, we're trying to humanize the demons. I think this point could have worked had we seen more of the demons up to this point, but this kind of gets shoehorned in towards the end. Even maybe have the kids have a demon friend like I talked about to tag along and build their humanity in at least one concrete example, but for the most part, Musica and Sunjo are only a reference in a short time of the 3 arcs ago that their 2 demons are the ones who don't really need to eat people, even though it's super clear that Sunjo is totally ready to eat people, but okay. Then we have our villains, who are the most boring villains in the entire series. I'll tell you why, because they sort of just show up and were given some kingdom dialogue junk, which was very boring, and when I tell you this arc meant nothing, it really meant nothing. I honestly can't remember it talking about it in this video. That's how boring it was. But you're probably asking yourself why? How could the war arc mean nothing? The problem is that the villains have established little compelling reasons to actually be villains, except for their overall survival. They just have to eat humans and it gives little context about their past. The thing is, there's a lot of dialogue and it really boils down to nothing. This is because in the end, most of them die and their designs are so evil looking. For the reader or the viewer to give empathy is actually a big ask, especially when they're driven to just eat so they can keep their form. So at this point, the story branches off and the tensions rise as Norman and crew Suicide Squad style their way into the castle. Meanwhile, Emma and Ray are on an acid trip trying to find Bleeblop. Really, they're on this wild journey, stuff gets crazy, and they find Bleeblop. They make him the new Promise, and they learn a little bit about the past, about the Rotary, and the origins of the original Promise, which was sort of cool. You could even see some characters that look like descendants of the characters now, which is really cool, but it kind of got shoehorned in like a last minute thing that they had to throw in because the show was about to end. They get their Promise, which we don't find out till the end, and they beat the Queen. I sped up through everything because nothing else really mattered. Nothing else really happens. Then Emma and Ray reunite with Norman and they say they'll save him from his disease and his friends from their disease if they do the friend thing, you know, friendship, which is dumb because this plot point gets fixed in the end of the story very easily without the use of friendship. So I don't know why I was here in the first place. Did they really think they were going to kill Norman? And now this is the part that really feels drawn out because we're at the end of the end of the end. So now the Rotary brother, Minerva's bro, is given some light to the story about why he's bad, and they talk to him, but he's like, nah, I'm going to be evil. And then he offs himself, and then they wrap things up by going back to where it all started, to the Grace Farms. Then they get reunited with Mama and everyone, and their mother dies in a blaze of glory trying to defend her children again. And it gets a bit emotional because, you know, they all loved her and have been with her for such a long time. So they come together and then they go to the other side of the world. Then we found out what Emma had to give up to Bleebloop. And it was actually a cool twist, something I would have never thought, and had a really good payoff after. And that was that her memory of her family was taken from her. So now they make it to the human world and everything is alright. So they look for Emma because she stays with this old man in some other part of the world that they have no idea where. And I'll talk about my theory about what they had done to Minerva here. So what if Minerva at that point had found a way to make it to the human world, and that old man that Emma meets on the other side of the world is actually Minerva, but she would never actually know it because all of her memories have been taken from her. And I find it really strange that she ran into this man. This man also looked very familiar, but I couldn't put it on the tip of my tongue where I've seen him before, and I'm not sure. I have my sneaking suspicions that it's actually Minerva, but I don't have proof, just a gut feeling, so take it for what you will. I think this definitely needs some examination, but why do you think this man was really important, or could I just actually be crazy? Let me know in the comment section down below. Then at the very end of the story, they reunite and it's sweet. Even though she doesn't remember who they are, the power of her family and the feeling for them is so strong that they stay together even though they're not too sure. Which is kind of interesting now that I think about it. How I felt about that old man is how Emma felt about her family, so maybe there's some connection there and the author did that on purpose or is trying to mislead us. I don't know. I'm really on this one, y'all. Okay, I'm gonna get off it. Alright, this is the entirety of the manga and the anime. I know I sped through it TLDR style, but just bear with me. A lot of the things don't really need that explanation, and you'll see them when they come up in the anime. I think my feelings are clear, but I'll restate them. The first arc works because it builds on such an anticipation for what the outside world might have been. However, those expectations are not going to be met because they're so extremely high. It's going to obviously be disappointing when the reveal is what I talked about earlier in that section. And those high expectations are really hard to live up to. I think the author never intended for this to last as long as it did. That's why a lot of these things feel haphazard and last minute thought, because being week to week with no initial roadmap was definitely something that made it difficult in the bigger scheme of things for this story. That's why even though many people may have loved it initially, it just feels like it fell so hard off the path of an amazing story that it could have been, and great if it just stayed confined to that beginning arc. I know people will watch season 2 and maybe even season 3 when it comes out, and they'll have opportunities to fix a lot of these things that I talked about in this video, but I think that's gonna be hard overall, especially when the first arc of the anime was so lacking. Even though everyone loved it, and I don't understand how, but what I do know is I love this series a lot. If I didn't, I wouldn't have made this long video on it. If I could use this parallel again, it would be this. Those who read the manga know the truth of how the manga fails and are not the children on the farm. Those who are enjoying the anime are the children who don't know what the world has waiting for them on the other side, lacking all of the tools to see what it would make for a satisfying viewing experience, albeit being so flawed. Now, ignorance is bliss, but do we really want to be the girl from episode 1? But maybe we can be like Emma and her friends who got their freedom. And isn't that what we all want in the end? Freedom? Nah. This was a long one, y'all, and if you made it to the end, wow, I don't know what to say, but you're a real one, and thanks for that. Check out that subscribe button, click that bell, and like the video because you're already here. So question, what do you think about the manga, anime? What did you like? What didn't you like? Where did the Promised Neverland fall off for you? What do you think could have done better? Tell me in those comment section down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Also, if you love anime and you love making manga, join the Discord where we talk about all that good stuff. I'll put it in the link down below. But yeah, guys, that's all I have for you today. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Bye.